So what exactly is a bad fan? Media critic Emily Nussbaum discussed the problem in a 2013 blog post about the final season of Breaking Bad. All shows have them. They're the Sopranos buffs who wanted a show made up of nothing but whackings, and who posted eagerly about how they fast-forwarded past anything else. They're the girls watchers who were aesthetically outraged by Hannah having sex with Josh. They're the ones who get furious whenever anyone tries to harsh Don Draper's mellow. Nussbaum's article focused on the vocal subset of Breaking Bad's audience that hated Skylar White, and if you frequented fan forums for the show when it was on, you know how far this Skylar hate could go. And when I say they hated her, I don't mean they thought she was a poorly written character or extraneous to the plot or something. No, these people talk about Skylar White like she's a real person who they despise. This internet hate mobbing went so far that the actress Anna Gunn would receive harassment and death threats, prompting her to write an article about the experience for the New York Times. So what was it about this character that inspired so much hatred, especially in the context of a show with so many morally reprehensible characters? On the face of it, she seems to be one of the most sympathetic characters on the show. This mother who only wants to protect her family, who gets drawn against her will into a dangerous criminal underworld, whose husband constantly gaslights her about her own safety. It can seem surreal to see people characterize her as selfish or unsupportive. Like, of course she's unsupportive. He's putting the whole family in danger when he could have just accepted the money that was offered to him at the beginning. This disconnect is often chalked up to sexism, and while I certainly think that's a big part of it, I think it also says something about how narratives in film and television can manipulate our feelings. Throughout the show, Skylar is most often framed as an antagonist, someone who threatens and obstructs the schemes of our protagonist, Walt. Walter, obviously being the protagonist, is usually the point of view character, and the one that we as the audience are intended to empathize with the most. After all, if we aren't rooting for the protagonist to succeed, then the writers haven't done their job. Early on, the show focuses a lot on Walt's feelings of impotence and inadequacy. We see the frustrations that come with his crappy jobs he works despite his impressive qualifications, and the pain it causes him when he realizes he's going to die and leave his family with nothing. We see the pretension of his former friends, who were led to believe screwed him over in the past, yet now position themselves as his benevolent saviors. We see the arrogance and hypocrisy of his conservative in-laws. And after seeing all this, we as the audience want to see the situation change. We want to see Walt show all these people up and become the one with the power. And throughout the show, we get our wish, at least sporadically. One of the essential elements of Breaking Bad is what we in the academic community refer to as badass moments. These are scenes usually centered around Walt, where he gets to feel powerful and intimidating, and we as the audience, sympathizing with him, feel that rush of excitement vicariously. But this feeling never lasts. Sooner or later, the consequences of his actions always catch up with him, leaving Walt and the audience to wonder, is this really what we wanted? Of course, this kind of juxtaposition is a common trait in crime dramas. Characters are drawn into an underworld for the sense of power and privilege it gives them, but are ultimately brought down by the consequences of that lifestyle. Skylar plays an important role in this dynamic, standing in the way of Walt's power fantasy and reminding him, as well as the audience, of all the pain and suffering he's causing. Of course, there will always be some viewers who will complain that she's ruining the fun. I think this dynamic is what leads to a lot of the Skylar hate. The very format of the show is subtly guiding you to see Walt's behavior as justified, even relatable, while simultaneously training you to see Skylar as an unreasonable, nagging obstruction standing in the way of what we want. Of course, there's nothing wrong with the show framing things this way. The whole point of narrative art forms is to manipulate our feelings, and one of the most powerful things they can do is get us to understand people and decisions that we wouldn't otherwise. But when I see the sheer volume of hate and vitriol that was directed toward an actress over a part she played, I can't help but think that something has gone wrong on our end. Anyway, let's talk about Rick and Morty. Because if any show ever had a bad fan problem, it was this one.
I want Szechuan sauce. Where's my Szechuan sauce? I pickle Rick!
Rick and Morty follows the adventures of the titular Rick Sanchez, a sort of super scientist whose signature portal gun allows him to travel anywhere through space, time, or even other dimensions. Rick is a parody of characters like Doctor Who, Doc Brown, and Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. The genius scientist whose unparalleled understanding of the cosmos gives them godlike power. Basically, the premise is, what if that character was a complete asshole? While the show itself has been a critical darling, much ink has been spilt on the internet about its unbearable fans. It started out as mere pretension. Rick and Morty fans became known for a sort of self-congratulatory attitude, as if liking a show proved how smart they are. I've seen this kind of attitude before among science fiction fans, but it seems a bit more justifiable when people are talking about Arthur C. Clarke or Larry Niven, who could spend entire chapters describing the logistics of theoretical societies and technology. A lot of these Rick and Morty fans seem to be conflating an extensive knowledge of sci-fi tropes with a knowledge of actual science. They seem to view Rick as a fountain of deep wisdom that most of society just can't handle hearing. I don't think Rick was ever intended to be viewed this way. Despite his incredible power and problem-solving abilities, Rick is an angry, lonely misanthrope. Of course, if you yourself are an angry, lonely misanthrope, there's a good chance that Rick's nihilistic cynicism could strike you as transcendental genius.
Listen, Morty, I hate to break it to you, but what people call love is just a chemical reaction that compels animals to breed. It hits hard, Morty, then it slowly fades, leaving you stranded in a failing marriage. Weddings are basically funerals with cake. If I wanted to watch someone throw their life away, I'd hang out with Jerry all day. Listen, I'm not the nicest guy in the universe, because I'm the smartest, and being nice is something stupid people do to hedge their bets.
In July of 2017, a Reddit post containing this paragraph was shared all around the internet. The first sentence became an instant meme, and many other memes about pretentious Rick and Morty fans were soon to follow. But unfortunately, the cringe fest was just beginning. So in the Season 3 premiere, Rick expresses a love for McDonald's Szechuan sauce.
In 1998, they had this promotion for the Disney film Mulan, where they created a new sauce for the McNuggets called Szechuan sauce, and it's delicious. And then they got rid of it, and now it's gone. This is the only place we're gonna be able to try it. It's in my memory.
Rick, you're doing this bit while your brain is melting.
This led to an online campaign to bring the sauce back, which McDonald's decided to do, but only for one day at select locations. Clearly they underestimated the demand, which wouldn't be a big problem if a lot of Rick and Morty fans hadn't caused a huge public nuisance at stores across the country, and all because of a cheap McDonald's sauce that they heard Rick liked. In the months after the event, packets of the sauce would fetch outrageous prices online. Naturally, this made the show even more of an online laughingstock. I really wish I could tell you that that was the worst thing to happen to the show during Season 3. Season 3 had a little bit of a different feel than Seasons 1 and 2. The other members of Rick and Morty's family were becoming much more fleshed out, no longer the simple background characters they started off as. Not to mention the show was becoming more openly critical of Rick's personality. This sort of thing is typical when a TV show has been on for a while. It becomes more character-driven as opposed to being premise-driven. Some fans weren't happy with this new direction, most notably the toxic subset we've been discussing. So they started looking for someone to blame. Now, between Seasons 2 and 3, showrunners Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland hired 4 new staff writers: Jane Becker, Sarah Carbiner, Jessica Gao, and Erica Rosby to the previously all-male writing staff. For angry fans who disliked the show's new direction, these women made the perfect scapegoat. All 4 of them had to deal with harassment, threats, and having their private information leaked online. As you can imagine, this did nothing to help the show's reputation. Soon after, Dan Harmon responded to the situation in an interview with Entertainment Weekly, where he said this: "I think it's all disgusting. These knobs that want to protect the content they think they own, and somehow combine that with their need to be proud of something they have, which is often only their race or gender. It's offensive to me as someone who was born male and white and still works way harder than them that there's some white male fan out there trying to further some creepy agenda by protecting my work. I've made no bones about the fact that I loathe these people. It fucking sucks. And the only thing I can say is if you're lucky enough to make a show that's really good, that people like, that means some bad people are going to like it too. You can't just insist that everybody who watches your show get their head on straight. So after looking at all this, the question I want to ask is, how do you get a show with such a dramatic disconnect between its creators and its fans? Well, let's look at an early episode. In Season 1, Episode 7, entitled Raising Gazorpazorp, Morty has to raise an alien baby, so when Rick searches for the origin of the creature, he takes Morty's older sister Summer along instead. They get stuck on a primitive planet where the all-male population is, interested in Summer.
Summer, put your burqa on!
That burqa is a human rights violation, and I spent a lot on this top.
Look, I'm trying to repair a portal gun with a bunch of sex doll parts, and I have to do it one-handed to keep these Belushis from carting you off. The least you could do is be ashamed of your gender.
Ugh.
Rick's interpretation of how this could have happened is less than progressive.
How did such backward idiots invent robots?
Obviously, at some point, the Gazorpians became so evolved that they replaced females with birthing machines. The resultant lack of distraction and henpecking allowed them to focus entirely on war, so they bombed themselves back to the Stone Age, and now they just fight with each other over fake with sticks and rocks all day long.
You think it's efficient to get rid of women?
Yep.
Later we learn that the females of this species live underground in a super advanced civilization which only uses the males to harvest DNA. Long story short, Rick pisses them off and Summer has to talk them out of executing him. At the end of the episode, they have this exchange.
Are you sure it doesn't make you reevaluate your policy about taking girls on adventures?
No, I'd say given what we've been through, that I was right the whole time, and any epiphanies about gender politics were a projection of your feminine insecurity. But hey, why don't you have a pink spaceship, go ride around and have a jolly old time? Maybe that'll shut you up.
I think the important takeaway from this scene is that Rick is completely full of shit. He was wrong. He knows it, Summer knows it, and if we've been paying attention at all, we know it too. I guess what I'm saying is that the show was always critical of Rick. It just used to be more subtle about it. And I suppose to an uncritical eye, this scene might seem like it's reinforcing the misogynistic attitude Rick showed earlier. In Season 3, Episode 3, entitled Pickle Rick, Rick, who now looks like a pickle, don't ask, goes to extreme measures to avoid family therapy, but ultimately fails. This leads to an argument between him and the therapist, who seems to see right through his apathetic exterior and criticizes his attitude directly. Some people have said this scene is ham-handed, and I don't think they're wrong, but on the other hand, what were the writers supposed to do? They had tried being subtle, and it led to a bunch of angry, pretentious sycophants making the whole show look bad. After Season 3, much better YouTuber Renegade Cut made a video arguing that Rick and Morty perpetuates the dangerous idea that cruelty and apathy are signs of intelligence. His interpretation of the show is different from mine, but I can't really say he's wrong. That is a message one could draw from the show if they were inclined to read it that way. Season 4 does a lot to address this kind of thing. Rick's loneliness and self-hatred is no longer subtext, it's text. I think this is a good change for the show, but I'll always love that first season too. Unfortunately, the show might never escape the cultural stigma it got from its fan base. I guess this is why we can't have nice things. You know, this has got me thinking about a storyline from BoJack Horseman. In the later seasons of the show, BoJack gets cast for a TV show called Filbert, a parody of gritty detective shows, and his friend Diane is hired as a staff writer. His character Filbert is an angry, self-hating, emotionally unstable alcoholic, which is actually a pretty good description of the darker parts of BoJack's personality. BoJack's own actions end up influencing Diane's portrayal of the character. At the show's premiere, BoJack says this:
"The most amazing thing about this show is that I'm sure we all have Filberts in our lives. Or we are Filberts. You know, we've all done terrible things that we deeply regret. I've done so many unforgivable things. And I think that that's what this show says, is that we're all terrible, so therefore we're all okay."
What?
Diane is shocked to see how much people actually love the character. This leads to a conversation where she confronts him.
Did you really mean what you said before the screening? About how Filbert made you feel okay about yourself?
Oh, I don't know, I was just...
Because, that's not the point of Filbert, for guys to watch it and feel okay.
Diane, it's a compliment. You did a good job. Relax.
I don't want you or anyone else justifying their shitty behavior because of the show.
What is your problem? Why can't you just accept that something you did is successful? It's connecting to people, and that's good.
I really love this episode because it's such a great commentary on the problem I've been talking about this whole time. When you write these kinds of morally gray protagonists who do terrible things for relatable reasons, there's always the risk that your attempt to show their complexity will be mistaken for saying that those things are okay. Alright, so I've been having some fun here talking about some of my favorite shows and how they can show us the relationship between their audience and their flawed protagonists. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to get more serious now. Because now I want to talk about when the bad fan problem gets really bad. So if you don't want to hear about Nazis, this is a good time to get out of the video. American History X is a 1998 film that tells the story of two young brothers who are drawn in by the neo-Nazi movement. The older brother, Derek, played by Edward Norton, reforms from those beliefs after a stint in prison, and the plot mainly concerns him trying to keep his younger brother Danny from going down the same path he did. The movie is explicitly anti-racism and anti-Nazi. And yet, it's found a following in a community you wouldn't expect. Actual white supremacists and neo-Nazis. The song The White Man Marches On, which was written for the movie, even became something of an underground hit, and was covered by several bands. On the face of it, this might seem absurd. Why would Nazis like a movie about why their own ideology is harmful? Maybe part of the reason is Derek getting some of those badass moments we talked about earlier. Much of the story is told in flashbacks, which show us how Danny came to admire his older brother and see neo-Nazis as schoolyard heroes standing up to bullies. One scene that stands out in particular is the one where Derek makes this bet against a group of black guys they've been playing basketball with.
I got a bet. I come in this game right now. Same score, but we play black guys against the white guys.
Damn your price, cracker.
No money for these courts. And not just today, for good.
These guys are only presented as a group of angry bullies, while Derek is shown bravely standing up for his friends. Now, of course, the way this scene is presented makes narrative sense in the movie. The scene is shown through Danny's eyes, and it's intended to show how he came to idolize his older brother. But when you create this scene to show how Danny came to see Derek as a hero, you run the risk of just making Derek look like a hero. I mean, look at this scene.
Drop the ball.
Even Danny gets to be the tough guy at one point, standing up to three black kids who are beating up a white kid in the bathroom for no apparent reason. Derek goes on several political rants in the movie, and despite his open racism, his ideas aren't that different from a lot of mainstream American political rhetoric.
There's over 2 million illegal immigrants bedding down in this state tonight. This state spent $3 billion last year on services for those people who had no right to be here in the first place. $3 billion.
And there's no real counter-narrative presented to these ideas. What little pushback Derek does get is extremely tepid. There's even an argument about the Rodney King trial, and if you're not very familiar with it, you might think there's no good argument against Derek's interpretation.
And people are going, oh, this poor guy who attacked 4 cops, and those cops end up on the stand defending themselves for using absolutely standard textbook self-defense procedures.
I don't think that the tape showed that at all.
Oh, you didn't think so, huh? And what, you're an authority, Ma?
After all, the movie keeps directly telling us how smart Derek and Danny are. Look, I'm not trying to suggest that the creators of the movie wanted to make white supremacy look good. The director himself was Jewish. But anti-Semitism is barely touched on in this movie. It's far more concerned with anti-black racism. So let's look at the black characters in this movie. Well, the ones who get to speak for themselves in any kind of meaningful way are Dr. Sweeney, the principal at Derek and Danny's school who taught them both, and Lamont, who Derek bonds with in prison. Frankly, I think both of these characters are pretty thin. Their main role in the movie is to make Derek and Danny doubt their conviction by reacting to their open disdain with calm compassion. Then there's the other really important black character. The one who doesn't get a name. He's only in the movie for a couple minutes of screen time, and he only has a few lines, but he's still one of the most important characters in the movie because he kills Danny at the end. Why does he do that? Good question. His motivation isn't really explored. I suppose we're meant to assume that Danny blowing smoke in his face in the aforementioned bullying scene made him angry enough to plan a murder at school. I mean, the only other times we see him are when he's making it comically obvious that he wants to kill Danny. I've heard people say that this is the younger brother of one of the guys Derek killed, but there's nothing in the movie to suggest that. We really don't get any idea what was going on in this kid's life that would drive him to be a bully in the first place, let alone commit murder. In this movie, which is so concerned with explaining why alienated white kids join hate groups, the violent intentions of this boy are treated as something that needs no explanation. Outside of the two designated good ones, black men in this movie exist for one reason: to justify the prejudices of our main characters. If the point of this movie was to convince people that racism is bad, I think it did a shitty job of it. Of course, one might argue that I'm being unfair. Maybe it's okay that this movie was more concerned with showing the plight of well-meaning white kids who are preyed upon by hate groups. But when a movie aspires to this kind of social importance, when it draws upon real-life events and racial tensions to make its point, it seems irresponsible to make marginalized groups such an afterthought in that story. Or worse, to use them simply as a threat to drive the plot. Because as I hope I've demonstrated in this video, it can be so easy for your art to deliver the exact opposite message from the one you intended. Okay, I'm glad to be done talking about that movie. Let's bring the chill music back. I guess the reason I felt the need to make this video is that once I started thinking about it, I realized these characters are everywhere. Protagonists who are amoral, violent, manipulative, narcissistic, or cruel. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to see these kind of characters go away. When done well, they can help us examine our own sense of morality and grapple with some of the most fundamental questions about being human. What makes someone a good person or a bad person? Can a good person become bad? Can a bad person become good? Where do you draw the line? Are good and bad even useful ways of classifying people, or is it just false essentialism? These are important discussions to have. But writers need to be careful, because the line between explaining a character's actions and justifying those actions can get very blurry. Moreover, media literacy is important. The whole point of art is to manipulate you into feeling a certain way, and there's nothing wrong with going along for the ride. But always try to be aware of how you're being manipulated. Be a critical consumer. Storytelling is a powerful tool. It's like a drug, and we all need to use it responsibly.
Nice. Just, hey mom, I'm feeling better?